A single gunshot echoed through the Alabama wilderness, shattering the peaceful dawn. Then came more, a terrible volley that sent birds fleeing from treetops. By midday, the Clearwater Crossing had transformed from a hopeful waypoint to a scene of unimaginable horror. The notorious Black River Gang left nothing but splintered wood, overturned wagons, and lifeless bodies scattered across the muddy banks. Or so they believed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other covering her mouth to silence her panicked breathing. From her hiding place 30 yards from the trail, nestled within a dense thicket of blackberry brambles, she witnessed everything. The ruthless efficiency of the attack, the pleading faces of families she'd grown to love during their 2-month journey from Virginia. The methodical way the bandits rifled through each wagon for valuables. She hadn't meant to wander so far from the caravan. Will, her husband of 3 years, had been driving their oxen while she walked alongside their wagon. The journey had been particularly difficult, as she entered her 5th month of pregnancy, with morning sickness that sometimes lasted all day. When her nausea returned as they approached the crossing, Sarah had stepped away from the dusty trail, seeking a quiet spot to compose herself. "Take your time," Will had called after her, his voice gentle with concern. "We'll wait at the clearing ahead. No need to push yourself in this heat." That simple act of kindness, those few steps away from the rutted trail, had saved her life, and the life of their unborn child. The attack came without warning. One moment the wagons were creaking their way toward the river's edge. The next, riders emerged from the concealed ravine to the south, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind bandanas. Sarah had frozen at the first shots, instinctively dropping behind a fallen log, then crawling deeper into the underbrush as terror overwhelmed her. Now, hours later, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the blood-stained ground, Sarah remained. Motionless, her muscles cramped and her throat parched from fear and thirst. Through tear-blurred eyes, she watched as the bandits completed their grim work, loading the last of their stolen goods onto pack horses. "Make one final sweep," ordered a man with a distinctive scar running from eye to jaw, whom the others called Victor. "Palmer wants no witnesses this time." Sarah's breath caught as a younger bandit approached her hiding place, his boots crushing the spring wildflowers just yards away. He paused, so close she could smell the tobacco on his breath. For an agonizing moment, he stared directly at the thicket where she lay concealed. Then a call came from the crossing. "Nothing worth taking in the last wagon, Victor. Just some papers and maps." The scarred man cursed. "Burn it all. We don't get paid for paper." The young bandit turned away, heading back toward the carnage. "Nothing here but rabbit trails," he called back. "Then let's move out. I want to be at Hickory Ridge by nightfall." As the bandits mounted their horses and rode away, Sarah remained frozen, afraid to move or even breathe deeply until long after the hoofbeats had faded into silence. Only when the first evening birdsong cautiously resumed did she dare to shift, her cramped limbs wincing at the pins and needles sensation that flooded her legs. The baby fluttered within her, a reassuring movement that brought both relief and a fresh wave of grief. Will was gone. Everyone was gone. The 12 families who had joined together in Richmond with dreams of new beginnings in the rich farmlands of Alabama territory, all dead in a single blood-soaked morning. When the last of the day's light began to fade, Sarah forced herself to think practically. She couldn't stay here. The scent of death would soon attract predators. She needed water, supplies, and shelter before deciding what to do next. With aching limbs, she rose from her hiding place, one hand protectively cradling her belly. As they traveled through the night hours, the full impact of what had happened and what lay ahead began to settle on Sarah's shoulders. Her entire world had been uprooted in a single morning of violence. Now, she was traveling into unknown wilderness with a man she had just met, from a culture she had been taught to fear, toward a future she could not begin to imagine. Yet when she felt the gentle movements of her child within her, so trusting and vulnerable, Sarah felt a fierce resolve hardening within her. She had not survived by chance, only to succumb to fear or grief. Whatever lay ahead, however strange or difficult, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her hundreds of miles from her childhood home. The horse picked its way carefully along the rocky trail, climbing steadily into higher elevations. Around midnight, they stopped beside a small stream to rest and allow Sarah to stretch her cramped muscles. "How are you feeling?" Ilan asked, offering her a strip of dried venison from his saddlebag. "Tired. Sore." Sarah accepted the food gratefully. "But the baby seems calm. No pains or anything concerning." Ilan nodded, looking relieved. "My sister will know better how to care for you. Maya has brought many children safely into the world." As Sarah chewed the tough but nourishing meat, curiosity began to displace some of her shock and grief. "You're Creek, but you work for the territorial governor?" "I scout for him," Ilan corrected. "I know these lands better than most. It allows me to protect my people by knowing what the white authorities plan, and sometimes to prevent bloodshed on both sides. And the men who attacked us, the Black River Gang, you've been tracking them." Ilan's expression darkened. "For nearly a month, they have raided several settlements and wagon trains, always leaving no survivors, always blamed on Indian attacks." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. But why? Simple robbery doesn't explain such thoroughness. Sarah struggled to find a word that could encompass the deliberate horror she had witnessed. "Senator Palmer seeks to drive all remaining Creek from lands he wishes to develop. The gang creates incidents that justify military action against my people." Ilan's voice was matter-of-fact, though his eyes revealed deeper emotion. "Your wagon train may have been targeted for a specific reason, beyond robbery." "What reason?" "I heard rumors in Fort Jameson that one wagon carried documents, maps, and land treaties that could protect Creek holdings from seizure." He studied her thoughtfully. "Did any of your company mention carrying official papers?" Sarah frowned, trying to recall details through the fog of grief. "The Parkers had a larger wagon with a locked compartment. Mr. Parker said he worked for a land office in Richmond." She paused, remembering. "I overheard the bandits cursing when they couldn't open something. They burned all the papers they found." This information seemed to confirm Ilan's suspicions. If they destroyed treaties that protected Creek land, rights many more lives than those lost today are at stake. The implications of this theory settled heavily on Sarah. Not only had she lost her husband and friends, but they might have been targeted specifically because of documents none of them had known the significance of. "How much farther to your village?" she asked, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were. Two people alone in a vast wilderness with powerful enemies potentially searching for them. "We'll travel through tomorrow and the next night," Ilan replied, helping her back onto the horse. "The third day should bring us to Red Hawk Village if we encounter no difficulties." As they continued their journey through the darkness, Sarah found her thoughts turning from the immediate horror she had survived toward the uncertain future ahead. The child within her would be born among strangers in a culture entirely foreign to her own. Yet the alternative, attempting to reach a white settlement alone, pregnant and grieving, seemed impossible. Ilan led the horse with confident steps, navigating by starlight through paths invisible to Sarah's eyes. Despite everything, she found herself trusting this man, whose quiet dignity and compassion had appeared when she needed it most. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Whatever lay ahead, she was no longer facing it completely alone. The faint light of dawn was just beginning to soften the eastern sky when Elan suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. He stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening for something beyond Sarah's perception. "What is it?" she whispered. "Horses, several of them moving fast." He pointed toward a densely wooded slope to their right. "We need to hide, now." With practiced efficiency, Elan led them into a ravine overgrown with mountain laurel, the pink and white blossoms providing additional concealment among the lush foliage. He helped Sarah dismount and guided her into the deepest part of the thicket, then returned to quiet his horse and disguise their tracks. "Army patrol?" Sarah asked when he rejoined her. Elan shook his head. "The horses don't have army shoes. Probably Blackwoodsmen, circling back to check the crossing." His expression was grim. They're thorough when Palmer's interests are involved. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dawn air. "Do you think they know someone survived?" "They may suspect. These men don't leave work unfinished." Elan positioned himself at the edge of their hiding place, where he could observe without being seen. "Keep low and still. They'll pass quickly, if they don't spot anything unusual." Within minutes, the sounds of approaching riders grew louder. Through gaps in the foliage, Sarah could make out 4 men on horseback moving at a cautious pace along the trail they had just left. She recognized the younger bandit, who had nearly discovered her hiding place at the crossing. The men paused almost directly across from their concealment, scanning the surrounding forest with visible tension. One pointed to the ground, dismounting, to examine something more closely. "Someone came this way," he said. "Fresh tracks heading north." Victor Blackwood, the scarred man Sarah had seen directing the massacre, spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the forest floor. "Could be a hunter or trapper. Doesn't mean anyone escaped yesterday." "Should we follow them anyway?" asked another rider. "Palmer won't pay the extra if there's a witness." Blackwood considered for a moment, his scarred face twisting in a frown. "We'll check the crossing one more time, make sure we didn't miss anything. If there's no sign of survivors there, we head to Hickory Ridge as planned." He glanced at the eastern sky, where daylight was strengthening. "Palmer's expecting us with those burned treaties by tomorrow night." As the riders moved away, continuing south toward Clearwater Crossing, Sarah released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The sudden relief made her light-headed, and she gripped a nearby sapling for support. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "They know someone. Might have escaped. They suspect, but aren't certain," Elan corrected, still watching the trail. "It buys us time, but we must be more careful now. No fires, no open trails." He turned to her, concern evident in his features. "The journey will be harder. Can you manage it?" Sarah straightened, one hand instinctively moving to her belly where her child rested. "I have to. We have to." The simple plurality of the pronoun, acknowledging the 2 lives she was responsible for, strengthened her resolve. "Lead on, Mr. Hatcher. We'll keep up." A hint of admiration flickered across Elan's face. "Then we travel by water for a while," he decided, gesturing toward the small stream that cut through the ravine. "The rocks will leave no tracks for them to follow." As they resumed their journey, taking a more circuitous route through rougher terrain, Sarah felt the first stirrings of something beyond mere survival instinct. A determination to not only live, but to somehow hold accountable the men who had destroyed so many innocent lives. The names echoed in her mind with each step of the horse beneath her: Victor Blackwood, Senator Palmer, the Black River Gang. Someday, she promised silently to the child within her, someday they would answer for what they had done. The second day of travel proved even more demanding than the first. Elan led them through terrain so rugged that Sarah wondered how he could possibly recognize a path among the jumble of rocky slopes and dense undergrowth. They followed stream beds, where possible, wading through shallow water to obscure their tracks. When forced onto dry land, Elan carefully brushed away their traces with a branch of pine needles, working backward until he could divert their trail into another waterway. By midday, Sarah's body ached from the constant motion of the horse beneath her, the pain intensified by grief and exhaustion. The baby seemed unusually active, perhaps responding to her stress, each kick and tumble a reminder of both her loss and her reason to continue. "We need to rest," Elan said, noticing her discomfort. "There's a sheltered place ahead where we can stop safely." The refuge proved to be a small cave, more of an overhang really, hidden behind a curtain of wild grapevines. Its recessed opening was invisible until they were nearly upon it, the interior dry and surprisingly spacious. "My grandfather showed me this place when I was a boy," Elan explained as he helped Sarah dismount. "It has sheltered creek hunters for generations." While Elan secured the horse in a nearby thicket, Sarah gratefully stretched her cramped muscles. The cave's interior was cool and smelled of earth and limestone, with a small circle of stones marking a previous fire pit. Though Elan had warned against making a fire that might attract attention, the sheltered space offered welcome protection from the elements and prying eyes. "You should eat and rest," Elan said when he returned, offering her a handful of dried berries and another strip of venison from his provisions. "We still have considerable distance to cover." Sarah accepted the food gratefully, settling on a relatively smooth portion of the cave floor. "Will your people welcome us?" she asked after satisfying the first pangs of hunger. Elan's expression grew thoughtful as he sank down across from her. "Some will. My sister certainly. Others..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some will remember the white doctor who came when fever struck our children last winter, after the army physician refused to treat our village. But others will see only a white woman whose kind has taken much from us." "And which do you see?" Sarah asked quietly. Elan studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I see a mother protecting her child. This is the same in all peoples." As they prepared to continue their journey, Sarah found herself curious about the man who had rescued her. "You speak English better than many settlers I've met," she observed. A hint of amusement crossed Elan's features. "I was educated at a mission school until I was 14. The missionaries believed they could civilize us through their teachings." The slight emphasis on the word civilize carried a subtle irony. "I learned their language, their writing, their God. Then I returned to my people to learn what the missionaries couldn't teach, how to live in balance with the land, how to honor the ways of my ancestors. And now you scout for the territorial." "Governor," Sarah said, trying to understand this man who seemed to move between worlds. "I scout to protect my people," Elan corrected. "Knowledge of white men's plans gives us time to prepare, sometimes to negotiate. Without it, we would be blind to the dangers approaching." His expression grew more serious. "But these days, even advance warning may not be enough. The pressure for our remaining lands grows stronger each season." Before Sarah could respond, Elan raised his hand for silence. He moved to the cave entrance, listening intently to something beyond her perception. After a tense moment, he relaxed slightly. "Just deer passing through," he said, returning to help her up. "But we should move on. There's a storm building from the west. We need to find better shelter before it breaks." As they resumed their journey, Sarah noticed the changing quality of light as clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew heavier, charged with the unmistakable tension that preceded a significant downpour. Despite the discomfort of travel, she found herself grateful for the approaching storm. Rain would further obscure their trail from any pursuers. By late afternoon, the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly intensifying into a steady downpour that soaked through Sarah's clothing despite the shelter of the forest canopy. Elan pushed them forward at a relentless pace, clearly seeking a specific destination rather than simply fleeing the storm. Just as Sarah felt her endurance nearing its limit, they emerged from the forest into a small clearing dominated by what appeared to be an abandoned homestead. A simple log cabin with a partially collapsed roof, long since reclaimed by nature. Vines covered much of the structure, and saplings grew through what had once been a garden plot. "Not ideal," Elan admitted as he helped her dismount, "but the back portion still has a sound roof. It will keep us dry until the storm passes." Inside, the cabin was a study in decay and resilience. Half the structure remained relatively intact, enough to provide shelter from the intensifying storm. The other half had surrendered to the elements, with rainwater now streaming through the collapsed ceiling. Nature had begun reclaiming the abandoned home. Wildflowers grew in the corner where a hearth had once stood, while a family of mice scattered. At their entrance, Elan cleared a space in the protected portion, spreading his oilskin on the floor to create a dry place for Sarah to rest. "I can risk a small fire here," he decided, examining the partial chimney. "The storm will hide the smoke, and you need to dry your clothes before night falls." While he gathered materials for a fire, Sarah explored their temporary refuge. Despite its deterioration, she could see this had once been someone's dream. A frontier home, built with care and hope. What had happened to the family who lived here? Had they simply moved on to better prospects, or had they met a fate similar to her friends at Clearwater Crossing? On the remains of a crude shelf, she found a child's wooden toy, a simple horse, carved by a loving hand. The discovery brought fresh tears to her eyes as she thought of Will and the toys he had planned to make for their baby. "Someone's dreams ended here," she said softly, when Elan returned with an armful of relatively dry kindling. "Many dreams end in these borderlands," he replied, setting about building a small, efficient fire. Creek, Cherokee, White Settler, all have lost much in the struggle for this land. Once the fire was established, Elan stepped outside to secure the horse and gather more firewood, while Sarah removed her soaked outer garments, spreading them near the flame to dry. Wrapped in the woolen blanket she'd salvaged from the wagon train, she felt the first real warmth since the attack. The baby shifted within her, a rolling motion that she had come to recognize as a response to her relaxing. "We're safe for now. Little one," she whispered, placing a protective hand over the spot where she'd felt movement. When Elan returned, he brought not only additional firewood, but also a handful of wild onions and what appeared to be some kind of edible root. "Not much," he acknowledged, "but better than dried meat again." He prepared a simple stew in the dented pot Sarah had salvaged, using skills that revealed a lifetime of living off the land. The resulting meal was surprisingly flavorful despite its limited ingredients. As they ate, the storm intensified, wind driving rain against the remaining walls of the cabin with percussive force. Thunder rolled across the sky in waves, occasionally shaking the very ground beneath them. Sarah found herself grateful for the solid presence of her companion, whose calm demeanor suggested he had weathered far worse than a spring thunderstorm. "Will we reach your village tomorrow?" she asked as they finished their meal. Elan considered. If the storm passes by morning and the streams haven't risen too high to cross, perhaps by nightfall. But we must be cautious. This area sometimes sees patrols from Fort Jameson. Because of your people. Partially, also because Senator Palmer's plantation lies a day's ride east of here. His influence ensures regular military presence, supposedly to protect settlers. Elan's expression revealed his skepticism about the true purpose of these patrols. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly chilled despite the fire. This Senator Palmer, he's truly powerful enough to command both the Black River Gang and the military? Edward Palmer came to Alabama with nothing 20 years ago. Now he owns the largest plantation in the territory, has the governor's ear, and seeks a place in Washington. Elan's voice carried no emotion, just a matter-of-fact assessment. Men gain such power by ensuring others fear the consequences of standing against them. And the treaties the gang destroyed, they threatened his expansion plans. Elan nodded. The last creek lands in this region include valleys perfect for cotton cultivation. Palmer has been trying to have our people removed for years, claiming we've violated previous agreements. His eyes reflected the firelight as he added, treaties signed in good faith by our chiefs are only as strong as white men's willingness to honor them. The bitter truth in his words silenced Sarah. Her people's history with the native inhabitants was not something she had previously questioned. Like most settlers, she had accepted the narrative that westward expansion was natural and right, that the lands being settled were somehow unclaimed or underutilized. Now, sitting across a fire from a man whose people faced systematic removal from their ancestral home, such certainties felt suddenly hollow. "I'm sorry," she said finally, knowing the words were inadequate. Elan seemed surprised by her apology. "You didn't create this situation, Sarah Mitchell." "No, but I've benefited from it without questioning." She stared into the flames. "Will and I thought we were simply claiming empty land for our future. We never considered whose future we might be taking." A long silence followed, broken only by the storm's continuing assault on their shelter. Finally, Elan spoke again, his voice softer. "My grandmother taught that understanding begins when we see through eyes not our own. Perhaps that is something at least." The conversation lapsed after that, each lost in private thoughts as the fire burned lower. Sarah found herself fighting to stay awake, exhaustion from 2 days of trauma and travel finally overwhelming her determination. "Sleep," Elan urged, noticing her struggle. "I'll keep watch." Despite her bone-deep weariness, sleep proved elusive. Each time Sarah closed her eyes, vivid images of the massacre flooded her mind. Will falling, the children's terrified screams, the methodical cruelty of the Black River Gang. She tossed restlessly on her makeshift bed, unable to escape the horrors replaying in her memory. "You should try to rest," Elan said softly from his position near the cabin's entrance. "Tomorrow's journey will be difficult." "I can't stop seeing it," Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Every time I close my eyes." Elan was silent for a long moment. "After my wife and son died, I walked for many days without sleep. The Creek believed that dreams are sacred, pathways between worlds. But sometimes these pathways become filled with shadows." "How did you find peace?" Sarah asked, sitting up to face him. "My sister made a medicine that helped clear the pathways." He hesitated before adding, "But in truth, peace came only when I found purpose again." "What purpose?" "Protecting others from suffering similar fates." His profile was silhouetted against the dying fire. "That is why I scout, why I track men. Like Blackwood, I cannot bring back those I've lost, but I can sometimes prevent others from experiencing such loss." Sarah considered this as she absently traced the outline of Will's pendant through her dress. "The men who attacked us, the Black River Gang, will they be punished? If I can help bring evidence against them, perhaps." Elan's voice hardened, slightly, "But they have powerful protection. Some say Palmer has territorial judges in his pocket, along with several military officers." This revelation sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the night air. "Is that why you said there would be complications if a patrol found me with you?" Elan turned to face her fully, his expression grave in the firelight. "The massacre raises difficult questions. Why this particular wagon train? Why eliminate all witnesses? If Palmer's interests are involved, a survivor could be inconvenient. You think I'm still in danger, even from the authorities?" The concept seemed impossible, yet after witnessing the brutality at Clearwater Crossing, Sarah could no longer dismiss any threat as unthinkable. "I believe caution is wise until we know more." He added a small branch to the failing fire. "But there is another reason I suggested bringing you to my people rather than to the nearest settlement." Sarah instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly. What reason? A white woman traveling alone while with child would draw attention. Questions about your husband, your destination, in your weakened state, with your advanced pregnancy. He let the sentence hang unfinished, but its meaning was clear. The brutal practicality of his assessment struck Sarah like a physical blow. She had been so focused on surviving the immediate danger that she hadn't fully confronted the impossible future that stretched before her. "My sister's dwelling has space," Elan continued. "Her husband was killed last summer in a dispute with loggers who were cutting trees on creek land. She raises her son alone and serves as our village's healer. With her, you and your child would have shelter and protection until you decide your next course." "Live among the creek," Sarah whispered, the prospect both terrifying and strangely compelling. "Would your people allow it?" "Some will object," he acknowledged, "but our chief Grey Fox is wise. He understands that old hatreds serve no one, and a child is sacred to the creek regardless of its parentage." Sarah looked down at her swollen belly, considering what future she could offer her child now. Their savings had been in Will's money, belt, likely stolen by the bandits. Their wagon, their supplies, their dream of a homestead in Alabama, all gone in a morning of senseless violence. "How would we live?" she asked finally. "I know nothing of your ways." "You would learn as all do." A hint of amusement softened his voice. "Did you know everything about frontier travel before you left Virginia?" Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling faintly at the memory. "No, I couldn't even harness the oxen properly for the first month. Will had to show me over and over. So it would be with us. You would learn to gather the right plants, to prepare hides, to make a comfortable home from what the earth provides." Elan's expression grew more serious. "But I must be honest. Life with my people is not easy, especially now. The government pushes us toward removal, forcing many creek west beyond the Mississippi. Game grows scarce. The old ways are threatened. Nowhere is easy," Sarah said softly. "At least not for me. Not anymore." They lapsed into silence, each lost in private thoughts as the fire burned down to embers. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Sarah, dragging her into a mercifully dreamless sleep. Dawn arrived with lingering rain, the storm having weakened to a steady drizzle that promised to continue through the morning. Sarah woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting the catastrophic events that had led her to this abandoned cabin. Then reality crashed back, bringing with it a fresh wave of grief so intense it stole her breath. The baby's movements anchored her to the present, a gentle reminder of her responsibility to the future rather than the past. As she struggled to sit up, Sarah noticed Elan had already prepared for their departure, packing their few belongings and fashioning a crude poncho from oilskin to better protect her from the continuing rain. "The storm has both helped and hindered us," he informed her, offering a breakfast of dried berries. "It has certainly erased our trail, but several streams will be difficult to cross with the high water." Despite these challenges, they made good progress through the morning hours. The rain eventually ceased, though heavy clouds promised its return. Elan led them along ridgelines where possible, avoiding the swollen creeks that rushed through the valleys below. When forced to cross moving water, he selected the shallowest points, leading the horse with extreme caution across slippery rocks. By midday, they had reached a high vantage point that offered a panoramic view of the territory they had traversed. Far below, Sarah could make out the meandering line of what must be the main trail, and in the misty distance, perhaps the remains of the wagon train, now just a dark smudge on the vast landscape. "There," Ilan said suddenly, pointing to a barely visible dust cloud moving along the main trail some miles behind them. Riders, moving fast. Sarah felt her heart constrict. The Black River Gang? Ilan studied the distant movement with narrowed eyes. No, too many horses, too organized. Military patrol, most likely. Could they be looking for survivors from the wagon train? A sudden hope flared in Sarah's chest. Perhaps there was still a chance for justice through official channels. Ilan's expression revealed his skepticism. Possibly. Or they could be responding to reports of the attack with orders that come from Palmer's influence. He gazed thoughtfully at the distant riders. Either way, it confirms we should avoid the main trails. If they believe Creek were responsible for the attack, any native person they encounter will be suspect. But I could tell them the truth, Sarah insisted, that it was the Black River Gang, not Creek raiders. And would they believe you? A woman they find traveling with a Creek man days after the attack. Ilan's question held no accusation, just practical assessment. Or would they assume you are confused, traumatized, perhaps even held against your will? The implications settled heavily on Sarah. Not only had she lost her husband and friends, but the very system she had been raised to trust for protection and justice might now be aligned against her. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the terrain gradually shifting from rugged highlands to more gently rolling hills. The vegetation changed as well, pines giving way to hardwood forests of oak and hickory, interspersed with open meadows, bright with spring wildflowers. "We're nearing Creek territory," Ilan explained as they paused to rest in a grove of massive beech trees. "The border exists more in white men's documents than on the land itself, but we'll be safer once we cross it." "Why safer? I would have thought..." Sarah hesitated, unsure how to express her assumption that moving deeper into native lands would increase their danger rather than reduce it. Ilan understood her unspoken concern. Creek villages have lookouts and warning systems. News travels between settlements faster than most whites realize. Once we're known to be under my protection, traveling with purpose rather than threat, we'll face less scrutiny than on lands where Palmer's influence holds sway. As they rested, Sarah found herself studying her companion with new awareness. In the short time since their paths had crossed, her perception of him had evolved from potential threat to reluctant rescuer to something she couldn't quite define. Not quite friend, perhaps, but someone whose quiet strength and integrity had earned her growing trust. Ilan was checking the horse's hooves for stones or injury when he suddenly stiffened, head lifting like a deer catching a scent. In one fluid motion, he moved to Sarah's side, his hand on her arm, guiding her deeper into the beech grove. "Someone approaches," he whispered. "Not on the trail, moving through the forest to the west." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, her body tensing for flight. Blackwood's men. Unlikely, too quiet, too careful. Ilan led her behind the massive trunk of the largest beech tree, positioning himself slightly ahead of her. "Stay here. If I signal, take the horse and ride northeast. Keep the sun on your right shoulder until you reach a river too large to cross. Follow it downstream until you find a village." Before Sarah could protest being left alone, Ilan had melted into the underbrush with silent efficiency, leaving her with instructions that suddenly seemed impossibly vague. How would she recognize his signal? What if multiple people approached? Would she even be able to mount the horse alone in her condition? The minutes stretched like hours as she pressed against the rough bark of the beech tree, straining to hear any sound that might indicate danger or Ilan's return. The forest seemed unnaturally silent, as if every creature held its breath along with her. "Niabi will not welcome your presence," Caden explained, noticing Sarah's concern. His father died when white settlers burned their home during the night. Perhaps this isn't wise, Sarah said, suddenly doubting the decision to come here. I don't want to bring trouble to your people. The decision is not Niabi's alone to make, Elan replied, his voice carrying quiet authority. Grey Fox will hear my reasons, and the council will decide. As they approached the village, activity slowed, then stopped entirely, all eyes turning to observe the unexpected visitors. Sarah felt exposed under their collective gaze, acutely aware of her outsider status, her torn and muddy dress, her disheveled appearance, and most of all, her obvious difference from everyone around her. A small delegation emerged from the largest dwelling to meet them. An elderly man whose bearing suggested leadership was flanked by two younger men, and a woman whose resemblance to Elan marked her as a relative, likely the sister he had mentioned. Elan dismounted and helped Sarah down, keeping a supportive hand at her elbow as he led her forward to meet the delegation. Speaking in Creek, he addressed the elderly man with evident respect, occasionally gesturing towards Sarah and her pregnant state. After what seemed an interminable explanation, the older man, Grey Fox, Sarah presumed, stepped forward to study her more closely. His deeply lined face revealed little emotion, but his eyes held a keen intelligence that seemed to assess not just her appearance, but something deeper. "My scout brings a stranger to our hidden place," he said in halting but clear English. "This requires explanation beyond what he has given." Before Sarah could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Not labor, but the stress and exhaustion of the journey finally manifesting physically. She winced, instinctively pressing a hand to her side. "The woman needs rest and care before questions," said the woman standing beside Grey Fox, also speaking English, though more fluently than the chief. "The journey has been hard on her and the child." Grey Fox considered this, then nodded once. "Maya speaks wisdom. Let her tend to the woman's needs. The council will speak with both of you when the evening fire is lit." The woman, Maya, Elan's sister, stepped forward, addressing Sarah directly. "Come to my dwelling first. Then the council will speak with you." Sarah looked to Elan, who nodded in encouragement. With no real alternative, she followed Maya toward a structure she now saw was not a teepee, as she had expected, but a more permanent dwelling constructed of timber and clay, with a thatched roof. Behind them, the intense discussion between Elan and the tribal leaders continued, punctuated by what sounded like heated objections from several younger men. Inside the dwelling, Sarah found a space far more comfortable and organized than she had anticipated. A central fire provided warmth and light, with sleeping pallets arranged around the perimeter. Colorful woven blankets and baskets lined the walls, and bundles of dried herbs hung from the roof beams. A boy of perhaps 10 years sat beside the fire, working intently on what appeared to be a small wooden carving. He looked up as they entered, his eyes widening at the sight of Sarah. "This is my son, Ryder," Maya said. "He speaks some English as well." Sarah nodded a greeting to the boy, who continued to stare with undisguised curiosity. Maya gestured for Sarah to sit on a pile of soft furs near the fire, then busied herself preparing what appeared to be some kind of tea. "You carry how long?" she asked as she worked. 5 months, Sarah replied, adjusting her position to ease the persistent ache in her lower back. "The baby has been active, especially these last 2 days. Maya nodded, watching with clinical interest as Sarah settled herself. Strong child to survive such a journey, like its mother. The simple observation, delivered without artifice or false sympathy, somehow meant more to Sarah than any conventional condolence. "I didn't know if we would survive," she admitted. "Your brother saved us." Maya handed her a small wooden cup filled with a fragrant tea. "Elan sees things others miss. It is why the territorial men value him. though many here question his choice to work with them. She settled opposite Sarah, her movements graceful and economical. "Now drink. This will help with the pain and calm the child." Sarah sipped cautiously, finding the tea bitter but not unpleasant. "Will your people allow us to stay?" Maya's expression grew thoughtful. "It is unusual. Not all will welcome it." She glanced toward the dwelling entrance where the murmur of many voices suggested a larger gathering had formed outside. But Grey Fox is wise. He knows that old ways must sometimes bend to meet new challenges. "And if he decides against us, then we will find another path." Maya stated this simply, as if already including Sarah in the collective we of her family group. "But first, you must be made presentable for the council. Your appearance now speaks of great suffering, which is true, but not helpful for what comes next." With efficient movements, Maya began gathering various items: a bone comb, a pot of what appeared to be rendered animal fat mixed with herbs, a dress made of soft-tanned deerskin decorated with simple beadwork. "My friend who crossed to the spirit world last winter was near your size," she explained, offering the dress. "Her belongings await her journey, but she would approve of this use." The simple kindness, practical yet deeply thoughtful, brought tears to Sarah's eyes for the first time since the initial shock of the massacre. "Thank you," she whispered. Maya nodded acknowledgement, her expression suggesting she understood both the gratitude and the grief behind it. "When you have finished your tea, Ryder will show you to our private place by the stream. Then we will prepare you to meet the council." As Sarah followed Maya's son to a small sheltered bend in the stream that ran along the village's perimeter, she was struck by how completely her world had transformed in just 3 days. The woman who had stepped away from a wagon train at Clearwater Crossing bore little resemblance to the person she was becoming, someone who now depended on the kindness of people she had been taught to fear. The cold water was shocking but revitalizing, washing away days of travel dust, dried tears, and the last visible traces of the massacre. As she donned the offered dress, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in a still pool, a woman she barely recognized, thinner despite her pregnancy, with eyes that had seen too much, yet somehow still standing. When she returned to Maya's dwelling, she found Ilan waiting with his sister. His normally composed features showed signs of strain, suggesting the discussions with the village leaders had been difficult. "The council gathers," he informed her. "Grey Fox will hear your story, but you should know that some voices speak strongly against your presence. Niabi and his followers fear bringing the army's attention to our village," Maya added, applying a cooling mixture of herbs to Sarah's sunburned face and hands. "They believe sheltering you will only hasten the removal they already dread." Sarah felt a weight of responsibility settle over her. "I never meant to bring danger to your people." "Danger finds us with or without your presence," Ilan replied. "But your testimony about what truly happened at Clearwater Crossing may actually help us if we can bring it to the right ears." Outside, the village had reorganized itself around a large central fire. The entire community had gathered, sitting in concentric circles with the council members, 7 men and 3 women of varying ages, positioned closest to the fire. Ilan stood nearby, his posture attentive but relaxed, as Sarah emerged from the dwelling with Maya at her side. A hush fell over the gathering. All eyes tracked her movement toward the central fire, some curious, others wary, a few openly hostile. She focused on keeping her steps steady and her chin high, drawing on reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed before the massacre. Grey Fox gestured for her to sit in the place that had been left open across the fire from the council. As Sarah settled onto a prepared buffalo robe, she noticed that Maya took a position among the council members while Ilan remained standing, positioned symbolically between Sarah and his people. "Ilan Hatcher has asked sanctuary for this woman and her unborn child," Grey Fox began, speaking in Creek with a younger man translating into English for Sarah's benefit. "This is no small request. The council has questions that must be answered before a decision can be made." Sarah nodded her understanding, unconsciously placing a protective hand over her belly. "First," continued Grey Fox, "tell us your name and your story. Speak truthfully, for we will know if lies cross your lips." Taking a deep breath, Sarah faced the council directly. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, her voice stronger than she had expected. "My husband William and I were traveling with 10 other families to start new lives in Alabama territory. 3 days ago, we were attacked at Clearwater Crossing by a gang of white men, not Creek, not any Indian people, who killed everyone but me." A subtle shift rippled through the assembly, a collective leaning forward to hear what would come next. "I survived only because I had stepped away from the trail to rest. I saw everything, the attack, the killings, the looting of our wagons. I heard them speak of a man named Senator Palmer, who wanted no witnesses left alive." At the mention of Palmer's name, several council members exchanged glances of recognition. The leader of these men was called Victor, a man with a scar on his face. They were looking for papers, maps, or treaties, they said. When they couldn't find what they wanted, they burned all documents they discovered, then left believing no one had survived to tell what truly happened. Sarah continued her account, describing in detail the attack, her hours of hiding, and Elan's arrival at the massacre site. She spoke of their journey to the village, including the near encounter with Blackwood's men, returning to check for survivors, and the military patrol they had observed from the ridgeline. When she finished, silence hung over the gathering for several long moments. Finally, one of the council women, an elder with silver braids and hands gnarled by arthritis, spoke in Creek. The translator hesitated before rendering her words in English. "Grandmother Willow asks why we should believe your account when white authorities will surely claim our people committed these killings." It was a fair question, one Sarah had anticipated. "I have no proof beyond my word," she admitted. "But I can describe each member of the Black River Gang in detail. I heard their names, saw their faces clearly, and this," she touched Will's silver pendant at her throat, "belongs to my husband. It was around his neck when he died, not taken by the killers because it was hidden beneath his shirt. A man's possessions would not remain with him if he had truly been killed by raiders seeking plunder." Another council member, a warrior in his prime with a striking eagle feather in his hair, spoke next. "Even if we believe you, harboring a white woman puts all our people at risk. The army searches for any excuse to force our removal west. This would give them reason to enter our village, perhaps claim we were responsible for the very attack." "This woman survived." Elan stepped forward. "A Tohi speaks from reasonable fear," he acknowledged. "But consider this. Sarah Mitchell is the only witness who can testify that Palmer's men, not Creek, were responsible for the massacre. If we help her reach the territorial capital with this testimony, it could expose Palmer's attempts to drive us from our lands through false accusations, or she could change her story once safely among her own kind," countered Atohi, claiming we held her against her will, reinforcing the very lies told about the massacre. Sarah felt her face flush with indignation. "Auntie, I would never—" Grey Fox raised his hand for silence. "Strong feelings cloud clear thinking," he said. "Let us instead consider practical matters. The woman's condition is obvious. Her child will come before the summer moon is full. Even if we wished to send her elsewhere, such travel would endanger both lives." He turned his penetrating gaze directly to Sarah. "Would you give your oath, in whatever way your people make sacred promises, that you would speak only truth about what happened at Clearwater Crossing and how you were treated among us?" "I swear it," Sarah replied without hesitation. "On my husband's memory and the life of our child, I will tell only the truth of what I witnessed and experienced. Grey Fox nodded slowly, then spoke at length in Creek, his weathered hands occasionally gesturing to emphasize points the translator did not render into English. When he finished, the council members conferred among themselves in hushed tones, while the rest of the village waited in expectant silence. Finally, Grey Fox addressed the gathering again, with the young translator converting his words. The woman Sarah Mitchell and her unborn child may shelter with Maya's family until the child is born and strong enough to travel. In return, she will share what skills she possesses and learn our ways with respect. When the time comes, we will decide what path serves both justice and safety. Relief flooded through Sarah, temporarily weakening her carefully maintained composure. She had found sanctuary, at least for now. As the formal council dispersed, individual village members approached, some curious, others still wary, a few openly welcoming. Maya stayed close by, interpreting cultural nuances and explaining relationships. Sarah learned that Grey Fox was Maya and Ilan's maternal uncle, which partly explained his willingness to consider their unusual request for sanctuary. My brother speaks highly of your courage, Maya told her as they walked back to her dwelling. To witness such horror yet maintain strength of mind, this earns respect among our people, regardless of your origins. Sarah glanced across the village clearing where Ilan stood deep in conversation with several men who appeared to be planning some kind of hunting expedition. He risked much to help a stranger, she observed. Maya's expression softened slightly. Since losing his wife and unborn son, Ilan has carried a weight of purpose that sometimes concerns me. He looks outward always, seeking ways to protect others, leaving little room for his own healing. This glimpse into Ilan's personal motivation touched Sarah deeply. His compassion toward her had not been merely general kindness, but something born of profound understanding of her loss and vulnerability. That night, sleeping on a pallet in Maya's dwelling with Ryder keeping respectful distance on the opposite side of the now banked fire, Sarah felt the first tendrils of something beyond mere survival take root. Not safety, exactly. Danger still lurked beyond the village boundaries in many forms, but perhaps the beginning of a path forward through the wreckage of her former life. In the days that followed, Sarah began the process of integration into the rhythms of Red Hawk Village. Maya proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to prepare traditional foods, identify medicinal plants, and assist with the various tasks that sustained daily life. Some villagers maintained distance, particularly Niabi and his closest friends, who made their continued objection to her presence clear through pointed avoidance. Others, especially the women with children, gradually accepted her presence with pragmatic tolerance, if not warmth. Ryder, initially shy and watchful, became an unexpected bridge to the younger generation. His natural curiosity about Sarah's background eventually overcame his reserve, leading to a halting exchange of language lessons, English words traded for their Creek equivalents. Ilan's presence was intermittent. His scouting duties took him away for days at a time, gathering information about military movements and settler encroachment that might affect the village. Sarah found herself watching for his return with a mixture of emotions she wasn't quite ready to examine closely. A week after her arrival, as she helped Maya prepare hides for tanning, a messy, physically demanding task she was still learning, Sarah noticed an unusual stillness fall over the village. Looking up from her work, she saw 3 riders approaching. From the east, their manner suggesting neither threat nor casual visit, but something in between. Seminole traders, Maya explained, noting Sarah's concern. They travel between villages with goods and news. The visitors were welcomed with formal ceremony that Sarah now recognized as traditional diplomatic protocol, Small gifts exchanged and ritualized greetings performed before practical matters could be discussed. The traders were led to the council area, where Grey Fox and the village elders assembled to hear whatever news they brought. "Should I make myself scarce?" Sarah asked Maya quietly, uncertain whether her presence would be appropriate or welcomed. "No. Grey Fox will want you to hear this. The traders often carry information from the white settlements that touches on matters important to us all." As they joined the gathering, Sarah noticed the lead trader, a powerfully built man with graying hair and a face marked by both humor and hardship, studying her with unconcealed surprise. "Isaiah Cooper," he introduced himself when formalities concluded, switching from Creek to English with practiced ease. "The last thing I expected to find in Red Hawk Village was a white woman in such interesting condition." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, meeting his direct gaze with her own. "Not where I expected to find myself either." Cooper's weathered face creased in a smile. "Life has a way of rearranging our plans, doesn't it?" He glanced at Grey Fox, who nodded permission for him to continue, particularly when Senator Palmer decides your land or your life stands in his way. Sarah felt a chill at this casual confirmation of Palmer's reputation. "You know of him?" "Know him, avoided him, watched him destroy anyone who opposed his ambitions." Cooper's expression hardened. "My late wife was Creek. I've seen firsthand how Palmer operates, creating incidents, manipulating officials, always emerging with more power and more land, while others take the blame." Grey Fox spoke in Creek, which Cooper translated smoothly. "The chief asks what news you bring of the massacre at Clearwater Crossing." Cooper's gaze returned to Sarah, assessing. "The official version claims Creek raiders attacked without provocation, killing all members of the wagon train. Military patrols have increased throughout the territory. Colonel Preston at Fort Jameson has issued warnings to all settlements about hostile Indian activity." "That's a lie," Sarah said, unable to contain her outrage. "It was the Black River Gang. I saw them clearly. A claim that would carry more weight if anyone knew a survivor existed," Cooper replied gently. "As it stands, Palmer's narrative dominates every conversation from taverns to the territorial governor's office." Ilan, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "What? Of the treaties that were supposedly in one of the wagons? Documents establishing Creek rights to the eastern valleys?" Cooper shook his head. "If such papers existed, they're likely ash now. Palmer was in the capital 2 days ago, presenting evidence that the Creek violated previous agreements by attacking settlers. He's pushing for immediate removal of all remaining Creek from Alabama territory." A murmur of dismay ran through the gathering as this information was translated. Grey Fox's expression remained impassive, but his eyes revealed deep concern. "There's more," Cooper continued grimly. "Palmer didn't come to the capital alone. He brought a man named Blackwood, who he introduced as a survivor of an earlier attack. This Blackwood described in detail how Creek warriors tortured and killed his family last autumn." "Victor Blackwood?" Sarah gasped. "Tall man with a scar from eye to jaw?" Cooper's eyebrows rose. "You know him?" "He led the attack at Clearwater Crossing. I heard the others call him by name." Sarah's hands clenched involuntarily. "He's no victim, he's a murderer working for Palmer." This revelation created a stir among the council members. After a rapid exchange in Creek, Grey Fox addressed Cooper again. "The chief asks if there is any way to bring the truth to those with power to act on it," Cooper translated. "Ordinarily, I'd suggest the territorial governor," Cooper replied, speaking directly to Grey Fox in respect. "But Governor Richards owes his position to Palmer's support. The federal marshal might be more independent, but his office is in Charleston, a difficult journey, even in the best circumstances." He glanced meaningfully at Sarah's pregnancy. And these are far from the best circumstances. What about Professor Thompson? Ilan suggested. The scholar from Charleston University who studies relations between settlers and native peoples. He was documenting Palmer's land acquisitions when I met him last autumn. Cooper considered this. Daniel Thompson has some influence in academic circles, perhaps even with certain officials in Washington. More importantly, he's known for his integrity. If he could be reached. I still have contacts at Fort Jameson who aren't under Palmer's thumb, Ilan said. I could get a message to Thompson. A dangerous errand, Grey Fox observed in English, surprising Sarah with his direct participation. Palmer's men watch the fort closely these days. I've avoided their notice before, Ilan replied with quiet confidence. And what of Mrs. Mitchell's testimony? Cooper asked. Written accounts carry more weight with officials than remembered conversations. I can write, Sarah said. If you have paper and ink, I can record everything I witnessed. Descriptions of the men, their conversations, details only someone who was present would know. Grey Fox studied her thoughtfully before nodding his approval. Isaiah Cooper will provide what you need. Ilan will carry your words to this professor, along with our council's account of Palmer's actions against our people. The chief turned to address the entire gathering, speaking at length in Creek. Sarah caught Maya's hand, silently requesting translation. He says that truth is a seed that must be planted in fertile ground to grow, Maya whispered. That your presence here may be the planting that finally produces justice for both our peoples. As the council dispersed to make preparations, Cooper unpacking paper and writing instruments from his trade goods, Ilan consulting with the village hunters about routes that would avoid Palmer's men, Sarah felt a weight shift inside her. For the first time since the massacre, she was doing more than simply surviving. She was taking action that might bring consequences to those responsible for Will's death and prevent similar tragedies for others. Later that evening, sitting cross-legged near Maya's fire with paper spread before her, Sarah began the difficult task of documenting the worst day of her life in exacting detail. Each face, each name, each moment of the attack recorded with painful precision. The work drained her emotionally, but with each completed page, her resolve strengthened. Your words have power, Maya observed, bringing her a cup of herbal tea, as she wrote late into the night. Use them well. I hope they're enough, Sarah replied, flexing her cramped fingers. Cooper seemed doubtful that anyone would listen. Isaiah Cooper has seen much injustice. It makes him cautious. Maya settled beside her, but he would not provide the paper if he believed your effort hopeless. Sarah nodded, taking comfort in the pragmatic assessment. Will your brother be safe carrying these to Fort Jameson? If Palmer's men suspect what he's doing, Ilan moves like shadow when he chooses, Maya replied with sisterly confidence. And he has friends among the soldiers. Men who remember when he guided them safely through Creek territory during the last conflict. As Sarah completed her account, signing and dating each page with formal deliberation, a plan began taking shape among the village leaders. Ilan would leave at first light, taking Sarah's testimony and supporting documents from the Creek Council. Cooper and his traders would depart the following day, carrying duplicate copies by a different route as insurance. If Professor Thompson can be reached, Cooper explained, as they finalized arrangements. He has connections that might bypass Palmer's influence with the territorial government. Federal authorities would be particularly interested in evidence that a state senator orchestrated attacks on American citizens. Sarah sealed her completed testimony with wax from Maya's candle, pressing Will's pendant into the soft material to create a distinctive mark. Tell Professor Thompson I'm willing to testify in person once my child is born, she said, handing the package to Ilan. whatever it takes to bring Palmer and Blackwood to justice. As the village settled for the night, Sarah found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The baby moved restlessly within her, perhaps responding to her heightened emotion and sense of purpose. Slipping quietly from Maya's dwelling, she made her way to a small rise overlooking the sleeping village. The night was clear, stars scattered. Across the sky in patterns she was only beginning to learn from Ryder's enthusiastic tutoring. The waxing moon cast enough light to silver the stream that wound through the valley and illuminate the outline of the surrounding hills. She heard Ilan's approach before she saw him, a deliberate sound, she realized, made so as not to startle her. "You should rest," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Tomorrow brings new challenges." "My mind won't quiet," Sarah admitted. "Too much has happened. Too much still lies ahead." Ilan nodded in understanding. The path is uncertain, but no longer walked alone. The simple statement carried more comfort than any elaborate reassurance could have. Sarah studied him in the moonlight. This man who had already risked so much for her and now prepared to face additional danger, carrying her testimony. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why do all this for a stranger? For someone whose people have taken so much from yours?" Ilan was silent for a long moment, his gaze directed toward the distant hills rather than at her. "When my wife died," he said finally, "I was consumed by anger. At the disease that took her, at the white doctor who refused to treat our village, at the world that allowed such suffering." He turned to face her, his expression both gentle and resolute. "But anger, consuming oneself, helps no one. Action that prevents others from suffering. This has purpose. This brings meaning from loss." The profound simplicity of his philosophy touched something deep within Sarah. She had been moving through shock and grief without clear direction, but now a similar sense of purpose began crystallizing within her. Will's death, all the deaths at Clearwater Crossing, could either destroy her with grief or fuel a determination to prevent similar tragedies. "I want my child to be born into a world where truth matters," she said softly, "where men like Palmer and Blackwood face consequences for their actions." "A worthy purpose," Ilan agreed, "one that honors your husband's memory and protects our people's future." As they stood together under the vast Alabama sky, Sarah felt something shift between them. Not romance in any conventional sense, but a deepening connection forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. "Be careful at Fort Jameson," she said as they turned to walk back toward the village. "Your life matters to many here." The unspoken addition, and to me, remained in the charged silence between them. "I will return," Ilan promised simply. "Watch for me with the new moon." Before dawn the next morning, Sarah joined Maya, Grey Fox, and several council members to bid Ilan farewell. He traveled light, carrying only essential provisions, weapons, and the precious documents. Dressed in a mixture of Creek and settler clothing that would allow him to move between worlds, he looked both formidable and strangely vulnerable. "May the spirits guide your path," Grey Fox said formally, touching Ilan's shoulder in blessing. Maya embraced her brother briefly, whispering something in Creek that brought a rare smile to his serious features. When he reached Sarah, Ilan hesitated, cultural protocols at odds with the moment's emotion. "Your words will reach those who can act on them," he assured her. "Trust in that." Sarah impulsively untied the leather cord that held Will's pendant around her neck. "Take this," she said, pressing it into his hand, "for protection on your journey." Surprise flickered across Ilan's face. This was your husband's, your memory of him. Will would want it used to protect the man, helping to bring his killers to justice, Sarah replied with certainty. "I'll hold his memory in my heart until you return it to me." Ilan nodded solemnly, securing the pendant inside his shirt. With a final glance that carried meaning beyond words, he mounted his horse and rode east into the lightening sky, bearing Sarah's testimony and the hopes of Red Hawk Village toward an uncertain reception. As she watched him disappear into the morning mist, Sarah felt the baby move within her, a strong, decisive kick that seemed to affirm their new purpose. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they had taken the first step beyond mere survival toward something more powerful. The pursuit of justice, not just for themselves, but for two peoples whose futures had become unexpectedly intertwined. The days following, Elan's departure fell into a rhythm of waiting and preparation. Sarah divided her time between learning creek ways from Maya and watching the Eastern Trail for any sign of returning riders. Isaiah Cooper and his Seminole traders had departed the day after Elan, carrying duplicate copies of Sarah's testimony by a different route. Their parting words offered cautious hope that Professor Thompson might be reached within a fortnight, if all went well. "Waiting is the hardest battle," Grandmother Willow told Sarah on the third evening as they sat together grinding corn for the next day's bread. The elderly woman had initially been among the most skeptical of Sarah's presence, but had gradually shifted to a position of guarded mentorship. "My husband used to say patience was never my strength," Sarah admitted, adjusting her position to ease the persistent ache in her lower back. The baby had grown noticeably in the 2 weeks since her arrival at Red Hawk Village, her belly now a proud dome that made physical tasks increasingly challenging. Grandmother Willow's weathered hands never paused in their rhythmic movement against the grinding stone. "Men often praise patience in women while demonstrating little themselves," she observed with dry humor. "But there is wisdom in learning to wait like water, not still, but moving in ways that honor the land's contours while never surrendering its essential nature." The philosophical response was typical of the elder, whose conversation often wove between practical instruction and deeper teaching. Sarah had come to value these exchanges, finding in them not just knowledge of creek ways, but insights that helped her process her grief and uncertainty. As the moon waned toward the new phase Elan had mentioned for his return, the atmosphere in the village grew increasingly tense. Military patrols had been spotted with greater frequency along the territory's boundaries, and hunters reported finding surveyors' stakes bearing Palmer's insignia in valleys previously recognized as creekland. "They move against us, even without waiting for government approval," Grey Fox observed during a council meeting Sarah had been invited to attend. "Palmer prepares to claim what he believes will soon be abandoned." "Should we consider moving the village deeper into the hills?" asked Atohi, who had gradually shifted from opposition to Sarah's presence to a grudging acceptance. Grey Fox shook his head slowly. "This has been our home for 7 generations. Moving now would only strengthen their claim that we have abandoned these lands." "But if soldiers come," Niabi began, his expression troubled. "We will face that decision when necessary," the chief replied with finality. "For now, we increase our watches and prepare for quick departure if required, but we do not abandon our ancestral grounds before we must." The council's decision resonated with Sarah in unexpected ways. These people faced potential loss of everything they knew, their homes, their way of life, their very identity, yet they met the threat with determined dignity rather than panic. Their resilience offered a model for her own approach to an uncertain future. On the 7th day after Elan's departure, as Sarah helped Maya prepare medicinal herbs for drying, Ryder burst into the dwelling, his young face alight with excitement. "Ryder's coming," he announced breathlessly in English, clearly wanting Sarah to understand immediately. "Not soldiers. Elan returns with another." Sarah felt her heart leap at the news, both from relief at Elan's safe return and curiosity about his companion. She followed Maya and Ryder to the village center, where people were already gathering to greet the approaching horsemen. Through the trees, she could make out two figures. Elan's familiar silhouette alongside a slightly stooped man, whose European-style clothing and spectacles marked him unmistakably as an academic. Professor Thompson, Sarah presumed, feeling a surge of hope that her testimony had reached sympathetic ears. Grey Fox and the council members assembled to meet the visitors, with formal protocols observed despite the evident interest in immediate news. Sarah remained slightly behind them with Maya, conscious of the curious glances the newcomer cast in her direction as he dismounted. Once the ceremonial greetings concluded, Ellen made proper introductions. "Professor Daniel Thompson of Charleston University," he announced. "He has traveled at personal risk to hear firsthand what we have learned about Palmer's activities." The professor, a thin man of middle years with an intelligent face and kind eyes, magnified by wire-rimmed spectacles, stepped forward. "Chief Grey Fox, honored counsel," he began with evident respect. "I've been documenting Senator Palmer's land acquisitions for nearly 2 years, but lacked concrete evidence of his methods. When Elan brought me Mrs. Mitchell's testimony, I felt compelled to come in person." His gaze found Sarah among the gathered creek. "Mrs. Mitchell, your account aligns with patterns I've observed but could never prove. If you're willing to speak with me directly, it could make a significant difference." "I'm willing to tell you everything," Sarah replied, stepping forward. "But may I ask first, is there news from Fort Jameson? Have there been further attacks blamed on the creek?" Thompson's expression grew troubled. "I'm afraid Palmer's campaign has intensified. 3 days ago, a homestead 10 miles east of here was burned to the ground. The only survivor, a young boy, was found wandering near Fort Jameson, claiming Indians with painted faces had killed his family." Murmurs of dismay spread through the gathering as this news was translated. "Was it truly Creek?" Grey Fox asked, his weathered face revealing deep concern. Thompson shook his head. The boy's description included details incongruous with Creek traditions, face paint patterns, and attack methods that don't match your people's ways. "I suspect it was Blackwood's men again, disguised to incite further hostility. Palmer creates incidents to justify removal," Ellen confirmed grimly. "The territorial governor has already issued an order expanding military patrols throughout the region." "How soon before they reach Red Hawk Village?" Atohi asked, voicing the question foremost in everyone's mind. "Based on patrol patterns I observed, perhaps a week," Elan answered. "They move in systematic sweeps, east to west." Grey Fox absorbed this information with stoic dignity, though the gravity of the situation showed in his eyes. "We will speak further in council," he decided. "Professor, you must be weary from your journey. Rest and refresh yourself. We will hear your thoughts when you are ready." As the formal gathering dispersed, Thompson approached Sarah directly. "Mrs. Mitchell, may I speak with you privately? Your written testimony was compelling, but I have additional questions that might strengthen the case against Palmer." "Of course," Sarah agreed, leading him toward a fallen log near the edge of the central clearing that offered a semblance of privacy while remaining in full view of the village. A concession to propriety that she had learned was important in Creek culture. Once seated, Thompson regarded her with scholarly assessment. "First, let me express my sincere condolences for your loss. What you witnessed at Clearwater Crossing must have been unimaginably traumatic." "Thank you," Sarah replied simply, having learned that extensive discussions of her grief tended to reopen wounds rather than heal them. The professor removed a leather-bound notebook from his satchel. "If you're willing, I'd like to review specific details of your account, particularly regarding the papers the Black River Gang was searching for. This may be the key to understanding Palmer's urgency in removing the remaining Creek from Alabama territory." For the next hour, Sarah answered Thompson's methodical questions, clarifying points from her written testimony and adding details she had recalled since documenting her experience. The professor took meticulous notes, occasionally pausing to adjust his spectacles or mutter observations to himself. "This is consistent with information I've gathered from other sources," he said finally, closing his notebook. "Palmer has been systematically eliminating anyone with knowledge of the original Creek boundary treaties signed after the War of 1812. These documents granted permanent territory rights that conflict with his current claims. And the massacre at Clearwater Crossing was likely meant to eliminate both the documents and anyone who might have seen them," Thompson confirmed. "The Parker family, you said, had a special locked compartment in their wagon," Sarah nodded. "Joseph Parker mentioned working for a land office in Richmond. He kept to himself mostly, but once told my husband that he carried papers that would right some wrongs to the territorial capital." "Joseph Parker," Thompson repeated, writing the name. "I'll need to investigate any connection to the Richmond Land Registry. If we can establish that he was officially transporting treaty documents, it strengthens the case against Palmer considerably." "How would we bring this case forward?" Sarah asked, the practical question that had troubled her since writing her testimony. "If Palmer has influence with the territorial governor..." "We bypass territorial authorities entirely," Thompson explained, his academic demeanor giving way to quiet determination. "I have contacts in Washington, officials in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who have questioned Palmer's reports about Creek hostilities for some time. Your eyewitness account, combined with my research and supporting evidence from the Creek Council, could trigger a federal investigation." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. "And that would stop Palmer's plans." "It would certainly complicate them," Thompson replied cautiously. "Federal investigations move slowly, but once initiated, they're difficult to dismiss through local influence alone." Their conversation was interrupted by Maya, who approached with a cup of herbal tea for Sarah. "You must rest," she said firmly. "The child needs quiet time now." Thompson rose immediately, showing respect for Maya's medical authority. "Of course, we can continue our discussion later." He gathered his notes, then hesitated before adding, "Mrs. Mitchell, I must express my admiration for your courage, both in surviving the attack and in seeking justice rather than simply hiding from further danger." After the professor departed with Maya to see to his accommodations, Sarah remained seated, absorbing the implications of their conversation. For the first time since the massacre, a concrete path toward justice seemed possible. Thompson's academic connections and methodical approach offered a way to penetrate Palmer's protective shield of influence and wealth. She was still deep in thought when Ilan approached, moving quietly despite his fatigue from the journey. "Thompson believes your testimony can make a difference," he said, settling beside her on the log. "If we can reach the right authorities." "In time," Sarah replied, unable to keep worry from her voice. "Palmer moves quickly, creating new incidents to justify removing your people before the truth can emerge." Ilan nodded grimly. "The burned homestead changes much. Even those at Fort Jameson who were skeptical of Palmer's claims now support expanded military presence throughout Creek territory. Did you face difficulty returning here?" "We took indirect paths, avoiding main trails," Ilan explained. "But patrols are everywhere now. Thompson had to abandon his wagon and travel on horseback for the final day's journey to avoid detection." Sarah studied him closely, noticing signs of strain beneath his composed exterior, the slight tightness around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You've taken great risks for this," she said softly. "As have you," he replied, his gaze moving to her swollen belly. "Your child grows well." "Maya says he's strong," Sarah smiled, placing a hand where the baby pushed against her ribs. "She believes it's a boy, though she won't explain how she knows." A hint of amusement softened Ilan's features. My sister has delivered more babies than anyone in 3 villages. If she says it's a boy, prepare for a son." The casual reference to the future, a time beyond crisis and danger, brought both comfort and apprehension. What kind of world would this child be born into? Would he know justice for his father's murder, or would Palmer's influence prevail, burying the truth beneath layers of false testimony and official indifference? As if reading her thoughts, Elan spoke again, his voice low but resolute. "Thompson brings not just knowledge, but conviction. He has dedicated years to documenting Palmer's activities, building relationships with officials who might listen. This is our best opportunity to be heard. When will he return to Charleston with our evidence?" "After the council meeting tonight. We must decide several matters quickly. The village's immediate safety, the route Thompson will take to avoid Palmer's men and..." Elan hesitated, his expression troubled. "And what we do about me?" Sarah finished for him. "Whether I should go with him to testify in person." Elan's gaze met hers directly. "Your presence would strengthen the case. An articulate white widow, clearly abused by Palmer's schemes, carrying an innocent child. This creates sympathy even among those who might otherwise dismiss crimes against Creek people." "But the journey would be dangerous," Sarah acknowledged. "Not just for me and my baby, but for anyone traveling with me. Palmer's men would recognize the threat my testimony represents. These are the matters the council must weigh tonight," Elan confirmed. "Your voice will be heard in this decision." As darkness fell, Red Hawk Village gathered for what might be its most consequential council meeting in years. Torches illuminated the central clearing, where elders and warriors assembled in their traditional formation, with Thompson given a place of honor near Gray Fox. Sarah was seated among them, her status as key witness overriding custom regarding outsiders' participation. Gray Fox opened the proceedings with a gravity that reflected the situation's seriousness. "We face decisions that will shape the future of our people," he began, speaking in Creek with Thompson translated for him. "Professor Thompson brings both hope and warning, the possibility of justice through federal authorities, but also confirmation that Palmer's men create false attacks to justify our removal." Thompson rose when invited to speak, addressing the council with the careful precision of an academic who nevertheless understood the human stakes involved. "The evidence Mrs. Mitchell and your council have provided offers our best opportunity to expose Palmer's criminal activities and potentially halt the removal order. However, time works against us. Each new incident blamed on Creek raiders strengthens his position with territorial authorities." "What path do you recommend?" asked Grandmother Willow, her ancient voice carrying surprising strength across the gathering. "I should return to Charleston immediately with all documentation," Thompson replied. "From there, I can reach federal officials within 5 days if river travel is favorable. Their intervention would supersede territorial orders regarding Creek removal." "And Mrs. Mitchell?" Atohi inquired, glancing toward Sarah. "Would her presence be required to convince these officials?" Thompson considered this carefully. "Her written testimony carries significant weight, especially with my verification of its authenticity. However, in-person testimony would be more compelling, particularly given her..." He hesitated, searching for the appropriate phrasing. "Her condition," Maya supplied. "The visible proof that Palmer's men killed not just those who died, but threatened future generations." "Precisely," Thompson agreed. "Though I must emphasize the journey to Charleston would entail considerable risk, both from the physical demands of travel and the possibility of interception by Palmer's associates." "There is also risk in remaining here," Niabi pointed out, his previous hostility towards Sarah now replaced with pragmatic assessment. If military patrols reach Red Hawk Village within days, as Elon predicts, a white woman found among us might be used to justify immediate action against our people. Sarah listened to these deliberations with growing understanding of the impossible choices facing everyone involved. Her presence endangered the village, yet her departure would mean hazardous travel in her advancing pregnancy. Remaining silent might allow Palmer's crimes to go unpunished, while pursuing justice placed additional lives at risk. When Grey Fox indicated she should speak, Sarah rose carefully, one hand supporting her back. "My husband and friends died because they unknowingly carried documents that threatened Senator Palmer's ambitions," she began, her voice steady despite her emotions. "I survived to tell the truth of what happened, not just for them, but for all who have suffered from his schemes." She looked around the circle of faces illuminated by firelight, some now familiar, others still unknown to her. "I came here a stranger, yet you offered shelter when I had nowhere else to turn. Now I must ask myself what course best serves both justice and the safety of those who have shown me such kindness." Grey Fox nodded encouragement, and Sarah continued, having reached the decision that had been forming in her mind throughout the council's discussion. "I believe I should travel with Professor Thompson to Charleston," she stated firmly. "My written testimony may not be enough against Palmer's influence. Federal authorities need to see that I am real, that my account is true, that an innocent child's future depends on their willingness to investigate crimes that territorial officials ignore." A murmur ran through the gathering, a mixture of approval and concern. Maya stepped forward, her healer's authority evident in her bearing. "The journey would be difficult in your condition," she said bluntly. "You enter the 7th month soon. The child could come early if the travel is too strenuous, which is why I would ask that you accompany us," Sarah replied, having anticipated this objection. "Your skills as a healer would ensure the best chance for both me and my baby, while your knowledge of Creek traditions would strengthen our case regarding Palmer's false accusations." This suggestion created considerable stir among the council. Members, a Creek woman traveling to Charleston with a white woman and an academic represented an unprecedented arrangement, with both opportunities and dangers for all involved. After lengthy discussion in Creek that Thompson translated in fragments for Sarah, Grey Fox rose to announce the council's decision. "Sarah Mitchell will travel to Charleston with Professor Thompson to present her testimony to federal authorities," he declared. "Maya will accompany them as healer and representative of our council. Elan will guide them safely beyond Palmer's territory before returning to warn our people of any approaching danger." The chief turned to address Thompson directly. "You must leave before dawn tomorrow. Our scouts report increased military movement from the east. Within 3 days, patrols may reach our hunting grounds." The professor nodded solemnly. "I understand the urgency. We'll travel light and use the routes Elan has suggested to avoid main roads and known checkpoints." As the council dispersed to make preparations for both the travelers' departure and the village's potential evacuation, Sarah found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the finality of the decision. She would be leaving the relative safety of Red Hawk Village, venturing into unknown dangers with her unborn child's future hanging in the balance. Maya seemed to sense her anxiety, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "The path of courage is rarely smooth," she said quietly, "but it leads where it must." "I'm afraid," Sarah admitted, "not just of the journey or Palmer's men, but of failing, of risking so much only to have officials dismiss our evidence. Fear walks beside courage, not opposed to it," Maya replied, with the practical wisdom that characterized her approach to life. "Now come, we must prepare what we need for the journey." The remainder of the evening passed in purposeful activity, Maya assembled medicinal supplies specifically selected for pregnancy complications, while Ryder helped Sarah pack the few possessions she had accumulated during her time in the village. The boy's usually cheerful demeanor had given way to solemn concentration, his young face troubled by his mother's impending departure. "You'll care for your grandmother while we're gone?" Sarah asked him gently. Ryder nodded, his chin lifting with determination. "I will hunt for her and bring water. I'm nearly a man now." Sarah smiled at his earnestness. "Indeed you are, and we'll return as soon as we've spoken with the authorities in Charleston." The boy studied her for a moment, wisdom beyond his years in his dark eyes. "Palmer's men will try to stop you," he said simply. "Be careful on the path." His frank acknowledgement of the danger touched Sarah deeply. During her weeks in the village, she had come to care for this serious child whose life had already been marked by loss similar to her own. "I promise to take great care," she assured him, "and to bring your mother safely home to you." Later, as Sarah tried to rest before their pre-dawn departure, she found sleep elusive despite her physical exhaustion. The baby moved restlessly within her, perhaps responding to her anxiety or simply growing more active as the pregnancy advanced. She placed a calming hand over the spot where a small foot or elbow pressed against her womb. "We're doing this for your father," she whispered, "so you'll be born into a world where truth still matters." A soft sound at the dwelling's entrance drew her attention. Ilan stood silhouetted against the night sky, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "I've come to return this," he said quietly, stepping inside and extending his hand. In his palm lay Will's silver pendant, the chain glinting in the dying firelight. Sarah shook her head. "Keep it until we reach Charleston for continued protection on our journey." Ilan closed his fingers around the pendant, the gesture carrying significance beyond words. "The path ahead will not be easy," he said. After a moment, "Palmer's influence extends throughout the territory. Even with my knowledge of hidden trails, we risk encounter with his men or military patrols." "Yet we must try," Sarah replied, the simple truth that had guided her decisions since surviving the massacre. Ilan nodded, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that communicated more than any flowery declaration might have. In the weeks since Clearwater Crossing, a bond had formed between them, forged through shared danger, mutual respect, and growing understanding of each other's worlds. "Rest while you can," he advised, moving toward the entrance. "We leave with the first light." Dawn brought heavy mist shrouding the village in ghostly white, concealing their preparations from any watching eyes. 4 horses waited at the eastern edge of the clearing, 3 for riding and 1 packed with essential supplies. Grey Fox and the council members gathered for a brief ceremony, offering prayers for safe passage in the Creek tradition. "Return when you can do so safely," the chief told Maya, embracing his niece with evident concern. "If the village must move before then, we will leave signs for Elan to interpret." Ryder stood stoically beside his grandmother, maintaining the dignity expected of a Creek boy on the threshold of manhood, despite the emotion evident in his eyes as he bid farewell to his mother. "I will make you proud," he promised Maya solemnly. "You already do," she assured him, pressing something small into his hand, a carved wooden figure Sarah recognized as a protective token, similar to one Maya had given her for the journey. Professor Thompson, dressed in sturdy traveling clothes rather than his academic attire, checked his saddlebags one final time. "We should reach the eastern ridge by midday if we maintain a good pace," he informed them. From there, smaller trails led south toward the river where we might arrange boat passage. Sarah mounted with Elan's assistance, settling as comfortably as possible given her condition. Maya had prepared a special pad for her saddle and bound her swollen belly with supportive cloth to minimize the journey's physical strain. As Red Hawk Village disappeared into the mist behind them, Sarah felt both apprehension and determination building within her. They were committing fully to a course that offered no certainty of success, only the knowledge that remaining silent would ensure Palmer's continued impunity. Elan led them through forest paths so faint that Sarah would have overlooked them entirely without his guidance. They traveled in near silence, speaking only when necessary and keeping vigilant watch on their surroundings. By mid-morning, the mist had burned away, revealing a landscape transformed by early summer. Dense foliage providing welcome concealment, but also potentially hiding dangers. "We approach a section that concerns me," Ellen informed them as they paused to rest the horses near a small creek. The valley ahead connects to the main settlement road. Patrols frequently use it when moving between Fort Jameson and the territorial capital. "Is there an alternative route?" Thompson asked, studying the terrain with a scholar's analytical gaze. "A longer path through the highlands," Elan confirmed. "It would add half a day to our journey, but significantly reduce the risk of encounter." "The safer path seems wisest," Maya suggested, glancing meaningfully at Sarah's condition. Sarah was about to agree when a distant sound froze them all in place, the unmistakable rhythm of multiple horses approaching at a steady pace. "Into the trees," Elan ordered quietly, helping Sarah dismount with urgent efficiency. "Thompson, take the women deeper into the forest. I'll conceal the horses and scout the patrol's direction." Without waiting for discussion, he led their mounts into a densely wooded area, while Thompson guided Sarah and Maya into the protective shadow of a massive oak thicket 50 yards from the trail. From this vantage point, they could see without being seen, a necessary precaution that nonetheless left Sarah feeling vulnerable without Elan's protective presence. The approaching riders soon came into view. Not the expected military patrol, but 6 men in civilian clothing, heavily armed and riding with the alert watchfulness of men accustomed to violence. At their center rode a figure Sarah recognized, instantly her blood turning to ice at the sight of his scarred face. "Victor Blackwood," she whispered, instinctively pressing further into the concealing foliage. "Palmer's enforcer," Thompson breathed, his scholarly demeanor giving way to evident alarm. "What's he doing this far from the settlements?" Maya's expression remained calm, though her hand moved to the knife at her belt. "Hunting," she said simply. "The question is, what prey does he seek?" The answer came moments later as Blackwood reined his horse to a halt, studying the surrounding forest with the predatory focus Sarah remembered all too well from Clearwater Crossing. "Spread out," he ordered his men. "Check for tracks along the creek. Hatch's Creek scout. He knows these woods better than any white man. If Mitchell's widow is heading for Charleston with him, they'll use these back trails to avoid the main roads." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Blackwood wasn't randomly patrolling. He was specifically hunting for her, somehow aware of their plans to reach Charleston with evidence against Palmer. "They know," Thompson whispered, his voice barely audible even in the stillness of their hiding place. "Someone at Fort Jameson must have informed Palmer about our intentions." The implications were chilling. Their carefully planned journey had been compromised before it even began, with Blackwood's men now actively searching the very routes they had intended to travel. As the outlaws dispersed to search the surrounding area, Sarah caught a glimpse of Villan concealed in the shadows 30 yards away, watching the proceedings with the stillness of a hunter. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, silent communication passing between them. The situation had dramatically worsened, but they remained undetected for the moment. One of Blackwood's men dismounted near the creek, crouching to examine something on the ground. "Tracks here, boss," he called. "Fresh ones heading east along the water." "Horse or foot?" Blackwood demanded, spurring his mount toward the creek. "Horse. 3, maybe 4 of them." The man pointed downstream. "Crossing here, then up toward the ridge." Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might betray their position. Had they left tracks visible enough for Blackwood's men to follow? Or was he finding traces of other travelers entirely? The answer came with horrifying clarity as Blackwood studied the ground himself, a cold smile spreading across his scarred face. "They're close," he announced. "The pregnant woman's with them. See the deeper print where someone helped her dismount." He stood, scanning the surrounding forest with methodical precision. $500 to the man who finds her first," he announced. "Palmer wants her silenced before she can reach Charleston with her lies." The men spread out with renewed purpose, weapons ready as they began searching the underbrush in widening circles from the creek. One approached the very thicket where Sarah, Maya, and Thompson concealed themselves, his eyes scanning the foliage with dangerous attentiveness. Sarah held her breath, one hand pressed protectively over her belly, the other gripping a thick tree root to steady herself. The hunter passed within 15 feet of their position, his footsteps crunching on fallen leaves as he methodically examined the forest floor for signs of passage. Just as he began to turn toward their hiding place, a bird call sounded from the opposite direction, a perfect imitation that nonetheless carried an artificial quality Sarah recognized instantly as Ilan's signal. The hunter paused, turning toward the sound with narrowed eyes. A moment later, the distinct crack of a branch breaking echoed from the same area, followed by what sounded like muffled movement through the underbrush. The hunter immediately changed direction, moving away from their hiding place toward the deliberately created distraction. "Something over here," he called to his companions. "Movement in the eastern thicket." Blackwood wheeled his horse around. "Circle that position," he ordered. "Don't let anyone slip past you." As the outlaws converged on the false trail Elan had created, Thompson gripped Sarah's arm. "This is our opportunity," he whispered urgently. "While they're distracted, we must move in the opposite direction. Maya knows an alternate route through the western hills." "But Elan," Sarah began, unwilling to abandon him to Blackwood's men. "Is creating this diversion deliberately," Maya finished for her, already gathering. "They're minimal belongings. He will rejoin us when he can. The child you carry must be your first concern now." The practical truth of this statement overrode Sarah's reluctance. With Thompson's support, she crept backward through the underbrush, moving as silently as possible away from the creek where Blackwood's men now crashed through the forest in pursuit of phantom quarry. Maya led them through a nearly invisible game trail that wound westward up a steep incline, away from the sounds of pursuit. The climb proved challenging for Sarah, her pregnancy making balance difficult on the uneven terrain. Thompson supported her steadily, his academic appearance belying unexpected physical capability. They had covered perhaps half a mile when the distant report of a rifle froze them in their tracks. 2 more shots followed in quick succession, then silence fell over. The forest once more. "Elan," Sarah whispered, fear constricting her throat. Maya's expression revealed nothing, though her knuckles whitened on her walking staff. "We continue," she said firmly. "Whatever happens, we must reach Charleston with your testimony. It is what he would want." The brutal logic could not be denied, though every instinct in Sarah rebelled against leaving without knowing Elan's fate. They pressed on through the afternoon, taking a route so circuitous and challenging that Sarah lost all sense of direction, trusting entirely in Maya's knowledge of the land. By sunset, they had reached a vantage point high in the hills that afforded a view of the valley they had fled. In the distance, thin columns of smoke rose from what appeared to be campfires, Blackwood's men making camp rather than continuing their search in darkness. "They will resume at first light," Maya observed, studying the smoke with narrowed eyes. "We must use the night to gain distance." Thompson nodded agreement, though concern showed in his scholarly features as he glanced. at Sarah's exhausted state. "Can you continue after a brief rest?" he asked gently. Sarah straightened her shoulders, despite the bone-deep weariness that threatened to overwhelm her. "I can continue," she assured him, though every muscle protested the thought of remounting. Her horse. "For my child, for Will, for Ilan. I will reach Charleston if I have to crawl there." As night settled over the Alabama wilderness, the three travelers moved forward by moonlight, guided by Maya's unerring sense of direction and driven by the knowledge that behind them the danger had not passed, only paused until morning brought renewed pursuit. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood at the window of a modest Charleston boarding house, watching the morning bustle of the harbor city with eyes that had seen too much. Her hand rested on her heavily pregnant belly, feeling the strong movements of the child who would soon enter a world forever changed by recent events. The journey from Red Hawk Village had tested the limits of her endurance. For 5 days, they had traveled through wilderness, avoiding main routes and settlements where Blackwood's men might have informants. Maya's knowledge of medicinal plants had sustained Sarah's strength through grueling terrain, while Professor Thompson's unexpected resilience had impressed them both. On the 6th day, as they approached the river that would provide safer passage to Charleston, a bedraggled figure had emerged from the forest ahead. Ilan, wounded but alive, having escaped Blackwood's ambush through knowledge of the land his pursuers lacked. The bullet had only grazed his shoulder, though blood loss and exhaustion had taken their toll. "Palmer knows," he had warned them once his immediate wounds were treated. "Someone at Fort Jameson betrayed our plans. Blackwood has men watching all routes to Charleston." This intelligence had forced them to abandon their original approach, instead securing passage on a small fishing boat whose Seminole captain was a cousin to Isaiah Cooper. The 2-day river journey had provided much-needed rest, though Sarah's advancing pregnancy made even the gentlest travel increasingly uncomfortable. Now, as she waited for Thompson to return from his meeting with federal officials, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had transformed since that terrible day at Clearwater Crossing. The naive settler's wife, who had dreamed of a simple homestead, had become a key witness in what Thompson called the most significant corruption case in territorial history. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Maya entered, carrying a steaming cup of herbal tea. Though the Creek woman had initially drawn curious stares in Charleston, her dignified presence and evident medical knowledge had quickly earned respect from their temporary neighbors. "The professor returns," Maya announced, handing Sarah the tea. "With others." Sarah felt her heart quicken. Since their arrival in Charleston 5 days earlier, Thompson had been shuttling between government offices, legal chambers, and academic colleagues, building support for a formal federal investigation. Today's meeting with the U.S. Marshal's Office represented their best hope for official action against Palmer. Footsteps on the stairs announced the arrivals. Thompson entered first, his academic demeanor enlivened by barely contained excitement. Behind him came 2 men, one in the formal attire of a federal marshal, the other a distinguished gentleman whose expensive coat and authoritative bearing suggested considerable influence. "Mrs. Mitchell," Thompson began, "may I present Marshal Samuel Dawson and Judge William Harrington of the Federal Circuit Court." The judge stepped forward, studying Sarah with keen interest. "Mrs. Mitchell, your written testimony has already prompted serious inquiry. I've reviewed the evidence Professor Thompson has compiled, including supporting documents from the Creek Council and affidavits from other witnesses to Palmer's activities." "Will it be enough?" Sarah asked, the question that had consumed her. Her thoughts since leaving Red Hawk Village. "More than enough to issue federal warrants," Marshal Dawson confirmed. "We received confirmation this morning that documents found in Richmond confirm Joseph Parker was indeed transporting official copies of the original Creek treaties, treaties that directly contradict Palmer's claims about boundary rights. Then, Palmer will face justice? Sarah pressed, hardly daring to believe their efforts might succeed. Senator Palmer was arrested 3 hours ago, Judge Harrington informed her, satisfaction evident in his tone. Federal agents took him into custody at the territorial capital. Victor Blackwood remains at large, but we have descriptions circulating throughout the territory. It's only a matter of time. The news struck Sarah with physical force. After weeks of danger and uncertainty, justice was finally moving forward. Will's murderers would answer for their crimes, the Creek lands might be protected by the rediscovered treaties, and her child would be born into a world where truth had prevailed, against power and corruption. There's more, Thompson added, unable to contain his excitement. Judge Harrington has authorized an immediate suspension of all removal actions against Creek settlements, pending full review of the boundary treaties. Red Hawk Village is safe, at least for now. Maya's usually stoic expression softened with visible relief. My son will not be forced from his home. Not by any legal order, the judge confirmed. The evidence of Palmer's manipulation of territorial officials is overwhelming. All his directives are now subject to review. As the men discussed legal procedures that would follow, Sarah felt a sharp pain lance through her abdomen. Different from the practice contractions she had experienced in recent days. Moisture ran down her legs, puddling on the wooden floor beneath her dress. "Maya?" she said quietly, interrupting the conversation. "I think it's time." The Creek woman moved to her side immediately, professional calm replacing personal emotion. "The baby comes," she announced to the startled men. "You must leave us now." 16 hours later, as dawn broke over Charleston Harbor, William Elan Mitchell entered the world with a lusty cry that seemed to proclaim his readiness for whatever life might bring. Named for both the father he would never meet and the man who had saved his mother's life, the child had his father's sandy hair and his mother's determined chin. As Sarah held her son for the first time, Maya placed something in the blanket beside him, Will's silver pendant on its leather cord, returned by Elan before he departed to bring news of their success to Red Hawk Village. "2 lives saved," Maya said softly, echoing words spoken at Clearwater Crossing that seemed a lifetime ago. "And many more through your courage." Sarah touched the pendant, then her son's perfect face, seeing in him both an ending and a beginning, the final chapter of one story and the first page of another that stretched before them, unwritten but full of renewed hope. In the months that followed, as Palmer's case moved through federal courts and Victor Blackwood was finally captured near the Florida territory, Sarah established a small home in Charleston. With Thompson's assistance, she secured a position translating Creek language documents for government officials suddenly interested in honoring the original treaties. Maya returned to Red Hawk Village once William was safely delivered, though. She visited regularly as the friendship between the women deepened beyond their shared ordeal. Elan's visits were less frequent, but carried special significance. His connection to both mother and child evolving into something neither had anticipated. During those desperate days after the massacre, on William's first birthday, a package arrived from Red Hawk Village. A tiny deerskin shirt, beautifully beaded by Grandmother Willow, a wooden toy horse carved by Ryder, and a letter from Gray Fox expressing the tribe's continued gratitude for Sarah's testimony that had helped secure their lands. Standing on her small porch with her son in her arms, Sarah watched the sunset paint Charleston Harbor in gold and crimson. The road from Clearwater Crossing had led through darkness and danger to a future she could never have imagined. One where worlds intersected, justice prevailed, and a widow's courage changed the course of many lives beyond her own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.